The augments in Black Ops 7 take forever to research. But is there a way to progress it even faster? What even counts towards the progression? And how long will it take to fully research everything starting from zero? Well, over the past few weeks, I have spent over 17 in-game hours keeping track of every single XP I've earned and every single percent of augment progression, and boy do I have some stats and some graphs and potentially a secret way of getting more augment XP, all in an effort to at least try and figure out how augment research actually works. As always with these analytical videos, be sure to use the chapters below to skip to whatever section you're most interested in, or skip to the end for the final results. But I want to put a gigantic disclaimer right here at the beginning of the video. This might just be one of the least confident analytical videos I've ever made. Augment progression is absolutely confusing, so this is going to be a journey about how I came to the conclusions I did, and I do believe I'm at least in the ballpark of the correct answer. But I will be releasing this spreadsheet, which you can use for a template to conduct your own research if you want to give it a good old peer review. So let's get started about how I went about studying this. Luckily in Black Ops 7, they actually give you percentages for your augment research. And so I thought this was going to be a cakewalk. Just play a game, record your XP, see how much you go up in percentage with your augment research, bada bing, bada boom, do some math, and you can figure out exactly how much at least 1% of augment XP is worth, and then we can extrapolate everything from there. And boy, that is sure what I tried to do. And so here's the spreadsheet. I know it's a lot to look at right now, we're really zoomed in, but I want to show you exactly how this is laid out. We have our game that we played, the final round of that game, whether or not it was during double XP, because a lot of this was taken during double XP, whether or not we exfilled, whether or not we had the rampage inducer on, how much time the game took, how much total XP we had. This is the biggest number as soon as you get to your after action report. And then what I decided to do was I decided to subtract all of the challenge XP, so calling cards, any attachment progressions, reticle progressions, any camo XP that I get, I decided to remove that. I wanted to do that just in case this total XP wasn't exactly what this augment was based on. Now from there we have a base XP per minute because we have the total XP and we have the time, very simple, XP per minute. But then for our adjusted XP and adjusted XP per minute, I took our total XP and then subtracted the challenge XP to get our adjusted XP and then XP per minute there. Are you with me so far? Pretty simple. From there, I also kept track of what augment we were researching, the starting percentage and then the ending percentage, which gave us the percent that we increased that game. So then if we take this percentage and then we used our total XP, we could figure out an XP per percent. So for example, in this very first line, we increased vulture rate from 47 to 52, which is 5%. With our total XP, we divide our total XP by the amount of by 5%, and we get about 8,000%. Now we could do that very same thing with the adjusted XP to get our adjusted XP per percent. I also made a note of when the major and minor augments were unlocked, but we can get to that later. So all of this work goes into figuring out an XP per percent. And then, I guess it is time, we can write down exactly when we've earned all of our major and minor augments, and then we can cross-reference those two numbers. Does the XP per percent mathematically line up with what we get with all of these augments? And so what I did is I took a brand new fresh augment. Because I played Black Ops 6, there was only Wisp T and Toxic Growth to choose from. Fireworks automatically started researching stuff, so it was actually kind of tainted. But I started with 0% in Wisp T, and then I would play a game until I unlocked the very first minor augment. As soon as I did, I quit the game, recorded all of the numbers, and then I repeated that process for the next major augment, then the next minor augment, then the next major augment, over and over and over until I got to the third major augment, because we all know the third major augment is automatically given to you at 47% because that's what it says if you've researched everything in Black Ops 6, right? Don't worry, we'll get to it. So after multiple hours of testing and quitting the game as soon as I've unlocked that augment, and these were the percentages that I got. And so now that we have at least these rough percentage points, we should be able to use our XP per percent as well as these percentage points to kind of find exactly what the real numbers are. And so I decided to take a very basic approach to this, and I decided to take our XP percent and our adjusted XP per percent and just average them. So for our raw XP per percent, we got an average of about 7,840 XP per single percent of the augment research progression. However, once we subtracted all of the extra bonus XP from challenges and stuff, the XP per percent that we got averaged out to be about 5,477. Now this is very interesting. This is where we kind of have to use our brains a little bit. There is obviously some room for error when calculating these percentages. Because it takes so many thousands of XP to progress these percentages, the room for error is quite big. Additionally, we are making a couple of assumptions that can be dangerous. I'm assuming that the game is going to display this percentage point until we've reached the next one, sort of like your XP level. And by that, I mean this. Let's pretend that 1% equals 1000 XP. I am assuming that even if I have 1999 XP, the game is still only going to show us as having 1% of that augment research. It's not until I hit the 2000 XP where it will flip over to the 2. I personally think that's a fair assumption because that's how leveling works, that's how XP works, and even if it did round, I think it would still give us the same results. Speaking of results, at first I tried to do some really interesting math about figuring out the average XP per percent, and then I subtracted the minimum from the maximum to get the difference, and then I did a whole bunch of kind of mathematical critical thinking, but then after a while I said, donuts, you donut, why don't we just play a single round of zombies until we finally progress one single percentage point. And so of course I loaded up Ashes of the Damned and I played one single round over and over and over and over again until my dead shot progressed from 48% to 49%. And yes, I did make sure right here to go from 47 to 48 first, so that way I had a clean start. And so as you could see here, I reached 48% in this game. This game right here, I earned 1100 XP, so I think it's fair to assume some of this XP should be counted towards this single percent they're about to calculate. But from about here on all the way down until we hit 49, we can count all of this XP, and thankfully we didn't get any challenge XP. And if you look in the bottom right corner, you could see the total amount of XP we got was 5,122. Now you can add a little bit more XP from that from the previous game, like I said before, that we actually got 48%, and that is given us the most accurate XP per minute that we've had so far. And luckily there's no challenge XP, there's no guesstimating, averaging, nothing. That is the definitive rough estimate of an XP per percent, 5,100. Now this is very important because it means that this percent here that we just calculated, 5,122, or if we're including this game where I actually turned to 48%, 6,253, the real XP percent is somewhere in between these two numbers. Now, through common sense, hopefully this makes sense, if our real XP per percent has to live between these two numbers, then there's just no way we're going to get an 18,000 XP per percent right here. And so I am very confident that we can disregard the unadjusted XP, because when you look at the unadjusted XP, the difference is so wild. We have as low as 4,000, as high as 18,000. It just doesn't make sense. But when we remove the challenge XP, this is the graph we get. There's still some variation, but even if you took the highest average and the lowest average, that would still be less than 1 percentage point, which is actually one of the original ways I checked to see what the XP per percent would actually be. 8,100 minus 3,500 is like 4,600, which is less than our estimated XP per percent, which makes absolute sense. Here it is stacked together, and you can really see how consistent it is once you get rid of that challenge XP. It is almost basically a straight line, this averages, this trend line. And this trend line is very important because I imagine that is going to be somewhere in the ballpark of our real XP per percent. And finally, after all of this investigating, I am fairly confident that the real XP per percent is either 5,250 or it's 5,500 XP. And this is where things start getting stupid. Because now, in theory, all I would need to do, if 1% equals that amount of XP, and we know that all of our major and minor augments are at these milestones, we could just calculate how much XP we would need for that milestone and how much we would need versus the previous augment. So with all of the data that I have, some of these numbers actually do make sense. For example, earning the 4th minor augment from the 3rd minor augment, around 88,000 XP, cool. So our very first thing, Vulture Aid. So this XP all the way until we earned it in this game right here, boom, we calculate that, and in the bottom right you see that's 89,000 XP. So hey, you know what? That feels pretty good. But then I saw this other game where I tried to confirm that with Melee Macchiato. I took it from 47 to 63 with double XP in one game, and I earned 97,000 XP, which is a whole heck of a lot of XP, especially since that was one of the games that I quit immediately as soon as I earned the augment. Now, if I quit as soon as I earned the augment, you would assume that the amount of XP that I earned would be close to 88,000 XP. But seeing how it was 9,000 more XP than I expected, I have absolutely no idea. And it only gets worse if we assume that it's the 5250 XP, because then it's even less XP requirements. Basically, every single time I try to calculate from the 4th minor augment to the 4th major augment, i.e. this game all the way down to this game, 108,000 XP, but then this is saying it's only gonna cost us 60,000 XP. Something doesn't make sense, and I think I know what it is. First of all, I was assuming that all of these percentages are perfectly even, so that's 47.00, 35.00, when in reality, I bet you these augment unlocks are really something like 47.85 or something like that to make the math a little bit better. On top of that, when I was double checking this 47%, because it's the major 3, you load up the game, you've done Black Ops 6 and every single thing's at 47%. Isn't that the 3rd major augment? Well, not according to the last game I played with Wisp T. I earned the 3rd major augment and then I backed out of the game, and what do you know, it's sitting there at 50%. 50% on one, 47% on the other. And keep in mind, again, I backed out as soon as I saw the pop-up. Now, either that pop-up is extraordinarily late, causing us to earn a whole bunch more XP, because I do see that the bar is filled out more with the 50% versus the 47, but my goodness, the inconsistencies are crazy. And these numbers when I actually unlock the augments are inconsistent too. The 4th minor augment at one point was 65%, but then it went down to 62%. So I'm like, okay, is it 63.5? This major augment was 76% for this one right here. But then for another one, it was 74%. So there's the other possibility that every single enhancement, perk, ammo mod, field upgrade, whatever, has technically different XP levels you need to progress for each individual thing. I don't know if that's the case because they all feel very samey, but that could be the case too. And the other reason I am just so frustrated with this is because if we graph this percentage and all of these XP milestones and everything, well, actually, if we do that, it actually doesn't look all that bad. You can see our augment unlocks at the bottom, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way up to 9, with our XP total coming in at 550,000 XP total. And you can clearly see with each augment, you need a little bit more XP. That kind of makes sense, but you'll notice around here, augment number 7 feels like it takes so much more XP than augment number 8. So the general flow is pretty well, but the percentages are all sorts of out of whack, especially when we look at the amount of XP we need to unlock the next augment versus the previous unlock. You can see major number 3, if we're at 47%, it's stair-stepping fairly well. But then at augment number 7, minor 4, we get a huge requirement of XP, but then we get a lesser amount of XP for 8, and then we get a crazy amount of XP for 9. But then if we were to switch this to 50%, then it would switch that around to make that worth more and then decrease as you're going up in augments. It doesn't make any sense. And mind you, none of this has to do with how much XP is in a percentage. Because it's a percentage point, it's going to proportionally change these no matter what. And so the conclusion that I can come to is the percentage displayed in game is either greatly incorrect and inconsistent, or perhaps more likely, the research pop-up notification is extraordinarily late or inaccurate in and of itself. That being said, I'm gonna keep the minor 3rd augment at 47%. It just makes the most sense, and please let me know in the comment section what percentages are you getting when you finally earn these last 2 augments, because it seems all out of whack. I imagine somewhere around 60% and 76% would make more sense, especially since that's about what I first found during my initial testing. This makes everything stair-step super beautifully, and it makes this graph look incredibly pretty too. It is quite satisfying to look at, actually, I don't know why. And so now that we have what I imagine to be a fairly accurate XP progression for augments, we can have a little bit of fun, because now we can calculate how quickly you can progress through each of these augments if, that is, we actually have our XP per minute, which luckily I was keeping track of here. Now I hope to do an XP progression video too, because I'm finding some weird stuff about XP, but I decided to go simple here and I made this beautiful thing. You can put in your XP per minute here and it will automatically calculate how many minutes and hours it will take you to earn all of these augments. And again, versus the previous augment too. Now, when looking at my XP per minute adjusted here, not including double XP because double XP was crazy, I was averaging, let's see, about 575 XP per minute. So if we plug that in here, you can tell how long all of this is gonna take. And for one complete augment progression, remember from start to finish, it looks like at this pace that I was going, which is a little slow, it's gonna take about 16 hours to progress a single augment path. That is assuming this is the correct XP per percent and we have all these numbers right. This can be reduced if I actually did all of these numbers wrong and this turns out to be much lower. Or like I said, if every single augment has its own XP leveling requirement, and you guys understand. Now 16 hours might seem like a lot, but if you think back to leveling up the final two augments, especially if you already had Black Ops 6 and you leveled them all up, these final two, minor, major, and then two minor here, this adds up to about 8 hours of in-game time. And if you ask me, that's pretty on the dot for what my experience was. Again, these numbers could absolutely be wrong, but I shared with you the journey of how I got here. And this to me was the final check to be like, all right, I think I'm onto something here. On top of that, if we use our double XP numbers, which on average I did about, we'll call it 1200 XP per minute, then boom, these final three things in only 4 hours, or about a little over 2 hours for these other ones. That feels very, very similar to what I was getting during double XP as well. And I should mention, yes, double XP does affect the augment progression. You do progress faster with double XP, and that's player XP. Now, 16 hours is indeed a lot, but I imagine a lot of people have already unlocked the first three minor and major augments, which essentially cuts that time in half. But let's calculate on a brand new account. If somebody has never played Black Ops 6 before, has zero augment research, we can calculate, because there are 24 enhancements in the game that you can research. As you can see, that is going to take you 382 hours, which translates to 15 days, 22 hours and 37 minutes. Now that is a lot of in-game time. And I would like to remind you that we have made a lot of assumptions. That is at my incredibly slow pace of playing zombies, and that is not including any double XP, which double XP happens quite frequently. That being said, even though I'm kind of enjoying the grind right now, I understand that it might not be satisfying. But I will say the first 6 augments, the first 3 minor and major, still feel pretty average. I don't think those have changed all that much from Black Ops 6. The grind really starts when you're going for that 4th minor, 4th major, and especially that's those 2 minor augment capabilities. And in saying that, those things are fairly strong, so maybe it is worth that grind. And with the camo grind, prestige, weapon prestiges, I feel like this is still somewhere in that ballpark. Although I completely understand people's frustrations, and those frustrations are completely valid. Which brings us to, how in the world do you speed up augment progression? I don't want a single augment taking 15, 16 hours. How can I speed this up? Well, as I said, you can't do challenges, you can't do the camo grind, reticle challenges, none of those count. So what in the world does count? Here is the secret, and I think this goes for regular XP as well. If you want fast augment progression, you need to earn medals. If you didn't know, medals give you a little bit of XP, and if you are constantly earning medals, that is just more and more XP going towards not only your player progression, but your augment progression too. Now, of course, I could absolutely be wrong, but if I were to theoretically subtract all of the XP that I got from medals, we would get a substantially lower XP per percent, which would mean that the augment research would be a lot shorter, which would mean that these numbers, the in in-game time it took us to unlock stuff would be much shorter. And like we just said, from our own personal experience, this seems super accurate to me, so I have to assume that medals are the single best way to get any semblance of bonus secret XP towards augment progression. I would highly recommend going into the medals tab and seeing what medals are easy to unlock. What I did, I loved using decoys or stim shots paired with maybe cryo freeze or dead wire with frenzied guards, so that way there were medals for each of those things that I was using, getting kills shortly after getting stim shots, getting kills on decoyed enemies, getting kills on enemies attracted to you by frenzied guard, and then killing a whole bunch of zombies really quickly. 20, 30, 40 zombies really quickly gets you lots of XP. Not only does it get you the 5 kills rapidly, but it also gives you the 10 kills, 15, 20 kills rapidly. All of those are just more and more XP piling up. And remember, I'm not talking about the badges. The badges are something completely different. I'm talking about the medals that pop up in-game, you know, the ones that we desperately need separated from notifications. Yes, those medals. The more medals you earn, the more XP you get. And from what I can guesstimate, that is going to be the way to get more augment progression. That being said, it's still not that much. It's going to be pretty hard to do, but I will also say the Rampage Inducer, from all of the testing that I did, it did not slow down your XP per minute. Now, strangely, it didn't increase our XP per minute either, but I will need to do further tests with that because I think there might be some nefarious stuff going on, but I don't have enough evidence to say anything about it. And plus, I play zombies really slowly, so I need to really push myself to the boundaries, especially the Rampage Inducer, to come to any sort of concrete conclusions. So let's recap. First and foremost, there are so many variables and so many inconsistencies throughout this entire test that I want to reiterate that this is the least confident I had ever been in any sort of analytical video ever. However, with the anecdotal evidence, I'm fairly confident that I'm at least within the ballpark of the right answer. So first of all, for Augment XP, it does not include any sort of challenges, badges, camo progression, weapon unlocks. All of that after action report XP total is completely worthless to your augment progression. Secondly, if you didn't know, each augment takes more and more XP to unlock than the previous, very much like all of the other XP in the game. And finally, I would be willing to bet that the amount of XP per percent of the augment research tab is somewhere between 5,250 and 5,500. In regards to the progression percent of the augment research tab, it appears as though those percents are either inconsistent at best, incorrectly labeled at worst, or when the research notification pops up in game, that is inconsistent. Basically, I was getting incredibly different percentages when I was quitting the game looking at our research. All of that being said, I have created this beautiful chart with all of the major and minor augments, all of the percentages that we have estimated it to be, followed by the estimated XP milestone all of those percentages are at, followed by the amount of XP gain you need versus the previous augment unlocked. And then on this cheat sheet, I've done the same exact thing, except this is the amount of time we estimate, where if we assume the average donut is going to have an XP rate of 575 XP per minute, you could see all of the different times that you're going to unlock all of the different augments. And at the end, you can see it's going to be about 16 hours from start to finish. Luckily, you can increase this XP per minute simply by playing faster. The highest XP per minute that I got without double XP was 672, so you can absolutely play faster than that. And luckily, double XP does increase this augment progression. And in theory, the player XP double XP tokens would increase this too. But I've heard that can be buggy for some people, at least as of now. And if you want the secret tip to getting more XP per minute, you are going to want to earn as many medals as you can. I'm talking about the jackrabbits, the massacres, using all of your different equipment, field upgrades, ammo mods. Go into your medals tab in the menus and figure out what medals have the most XP. They're all fairly similar, and which ones you can get fairly consistently. Once again, please call me out if I've done anything wrong. I'm a man of science. I like it when I'm right, but I love it when I'm wrong and we can learn something together. This spreadsheet, the cheat sheets that I just showed you, will be in the description. And if you loved and missed the stats and graphs and analytical videos, I've got so much more on the way. I'm testing gobblegums. I am looking to do the Juggernog augments as soon as possible. And you better believe I am still working on the DPS spreadsheet. But now that you know exactly how Augment XP actually works and how long it's going to take to potentially unlock all of the augments, you need to prioritize the best augments first. And lucky for you, I just went over my favorite augments so far in Black Ops 7 Zombies. Be sure to check it out here and stay beautiful.